My name is Azubike, and I lead design technology at Inform Studio. And this was a project we did 2017. We've done heavy computation. This wasn't particularly the best example, but my goal today is to kind of help us. How many people have used Grasshopper before? Just out of curiosity. Dynamo? How many people haven't heard about any of those tools before? Okay, so we have a good number. Yeah, so my goal today is to kind of show us how a project like this can, or how computation can help us leverage or do well in a project like this. But before I go into that, I think something that we tend to miss out in the industry is how technology outside the industry is actually affecting what we're doing. And not just us, but our clients, how they're being bamboozled by advancement in technology. This is a graph that shows pretty much the acceleration, and it's pretty crazy to see just this type of asymptote, curve between just somewhere in 1980 and 2000. And it's because hugely on how chips have become more effective, more compact, and processing power has really skyrocketed. You now have more, because of the size of these chips, you have more items being connected to the internet, you have more data, and our clients, we are exposed to all of these things. Our phones, our wristwatches, everywhere we go, there's data being collected. I mean, no one is immune to the whole craziness of security right now. But this graph is particularly interesting when you look at just the rate of adoption on technology and how things have been adopted. Especially you think about the internet. Look at that graph between 1990 and 2005, and it's crazy the kind of adoption that's happening just in terms of technology. This is an interesting stat that I saw 2 days ago. This is how much data is moving through the internet per second. 8,000 tweets, 78 terabytes of data is moving. And when you think about our clients and what they're doing now, they've pretty much moved from this idea of traditional BI where you're kind of reactive to things, and they're now trying to predict things. So with clients like that, what does that mean for us as an industry? It means that they expect things to happen on the fly. So there's advanced computing, ubiquitous data, it's everywhere, and advanced analytics. And some of us are still doing this. It's mind-blowing to think that while all of this data is, happening around us, we're still trying to figure out, am I a CAD person? Am I a Revit person? When in reality, you think about the trajectory of how we've evolved as an industry, starting from hand drafting tools all the way to computer drafting. The big shift is the information, because now all of a sudden we have access to the data that we're working with. This is a Revit curtain wall. But the interesting thing that people don't see is what happens behind this model. So this is what I exported a Revit file to Access. Just Revit is pretty much a database. So I exported it to Access, and this is tons of information that was in our file, and these are all the connections that are happening in a Revit file, just one file. Each of these things are a table, and each table is connected to different things. That's why you're able to find out how many floors, how many doors are on the floor, because there's the interrelationship between all of them. But the whole idea of, the information age didn't really start now. People started playing around with API access, which is pretty much the software companies opening up a portion of their software to have people hack the system to do what they want. And people have been doing that through macros. I don't know anyone here who ran Lisp operations. I've run into a bunch of people, but that used to be the way people automated things with CAD. You think of teams like the modeling group at Foster and Partners. Like these guys were, embedding mathematical equations to kind of develop geometry. That didn't happen today. Like this is things that happened kind of in the early 2000s. And then you have parametric capabilities. All of that led to the idea of, all right, we have this information, that's fine. How do we start to leverage it? And this whole idea of, Grasshopper came up, easier UI, given that some of you are, more advanced in this or have used it, this is no new thing to you. But it gets to a point where some of these visual scripting tools become helpless. Like you can't, they hinder what you can do because they are pretty much small chunks of code, but sometimes you need to do more advanced things. And so computation is not about drawings. Seems like the group we have here seems to get that. But I think of computation as curating the flow of data pretty much to achieve a desired result or reveal some unknown. And why I say that is because it's beyond coding. It's a bigger understanding of how do machines talk, how do softwares interact. Like I said, it's not about coding, it's about thinking. And that's, I think, a problem that our industry is trying to get out of, especially when we start comparing CAD and Revit. Nobody is drawing in Revit. Some people still do, but Revit is not a drawing tool. And so you have this idea of you can't leverage the information in Revit because it's a line, and you can't use a line for anything. So how do we use computation on a project like this? Just to give you some background on the project, it's an 88,000 square foot project, and only pretty much 2.5 people delivered this project from kickoff to CD package in 6 months. And it came under budget and was on schedule. I'm glad I can say that openly in the campus because it's true. We leverage computation on this project a lot, but I just want to focus on the panels and the windows because it wasn't perfect, but it helped us save money on portions of the project that might lead to waste or lead to even lack of maintaining the design integrity just because we're trying to save money. Again, computational thinking starts from a curious challenge. And so you will notice that, like the things I gave you, does anybody have more than 2, or does everybody have 1? Is there anyone who doesn't have anything? So what we're going to do today is, instead of me, showing you fancy Grasshopper scripts or, just tools like that, we're going to build the logic ourselves. And so what you're holding are different logic aspects of the logic that made the script. So as I move along, what I will ask is, hey, what step do you think comes next? And there's a task. What you have is a subtask. So when you see me go over to the task, whoever has that corresponding color, and you think that, oh, at this point, I think this is the next step in the logic process, feel free to tell us why you think that. You don't have any. Does anybody have more than 1?
Yeah, 5 or 6 extra.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There we go. I'm going to play a video real quick. I don't know how many of you have seen this video. So watch it carefully, because we're going to talk about how do you achieve a project like that just through the logic that you see here. Those are windows, and we're trying to make sure that we aren't having any waste in the material, the panels, the materials we're using for the panels. So it's a question of how do we have this variation in window types without cutting out of having waste, essentially. And so that's scaling it, testing our script to see that it does what it needs to do. Just an idea of how it was formulated. You can see was the different cutouts. We're able to see, overall square footage of each glazing, the window type proportion, so that we can make decisions on which, how much of this do we want, which ones need to be operable, how many of those do we want, and this is happening inside Grasshopper. And so with that said, just to give you some background before we get into it, the success of this already started from the architect, Eric Kluster, who led this project. He created modules and then fit different programs within each module. And so we had a module that's defined by the grid spacing, that's 25 feet 6, and that pretty much set us up for success on this project. And in as much as people say it's computer, and it still goes back to thinking about how you formulate the problem. And these are sketches of mine, and I will tell you as well that some of these sketches were because of the lack of skill set of maybe running an optimization algorithm. So I was doing it manually, trying to figure out, okay, what are my windows, what are the standard sizes, what are the different ways I can align this. Once I get it, I can set up an algorithm that then we can control the distribution. So that's how we approach this. So with that said, I would like, so these are, different mix of subtasks right on the top. And what you have on the bottom are the tasks that, we went along with to develop this algorithm. The first thing really is, before we even also get into this, is to understand the end goal was to have a BIM file. The information needed to be mature enough, not just a drawing. So when you think about windows in Revit, how do you think the computer understands how to place a window? What things jump to your mind?
You're talking about an algorithm, or
No, just how, when you place a window, what do you do? So more of the technicality behind Revit, like hosting. There we go. Okay, what else?
Offset from
Sail height. Okay, the family. Exactly. So see, that's how the computer thinks. It's looking for, there's a point, there's a host that's associated with that point. There are levels. So when you now think about computation, is that information can come from different places. It doesn't need to be specified in the program. If I can access that information in the background, then it means I can automate different things, especially given the fact that we're working in Grasshopper and Rhino in the DD stage, and then we have to move that information to Revit for the documentation side. So we have to figure out, how do we not create redundant information? How do we use the information that we created in Rhino and Grasshopper and pass that information onto Revit? So it's a question of, what do we have? How does the software work, and what do we need to output out of Rhino? So the first thing, like I said, was I went through this process manually, but then now that I had a pretty much dimensionally something that worked, the next thing was to create that, simulate that in the software in Grasshopper. So that's creating an algorithm for the combinations of the panels and the windows. So that was one task. What do you think, this is color blue, so what do you think will be a subtask under that task for anyone who has a blue? Creating an algorithm that simulates that combination. So I sketched out, like I said, ways for the window size and you have an answer?
I think so.
Okay.
Use metrics to decide how much of each window pane combination should exist on the facade.
What color do you have? Aha, that's not a blue. That's okay. Does anybody have a blue? No?
I have a blue, but I don't think it's the first one.
Okay.
I have one.
Is there any blue there?
Should I read it?
Sure. Wow.
Window location is placed based upon XYZ coordinates.
No. So there's a darker blue, and I think there's a light blue. So it's maybe a darker blue.
So my dark blue is divide, drag or curve into equal modules representing two rooms.
Why do you think that would be it? That's it, but why? I'm just curious. Like, why do you think that would be it?
So that because it's the module that the windows could be placed upon, is the division of the rooms.
Yes. So what we did was, from Revit, something you have to pay attention to when you're modeling is origin point, again, so that you don't, yeah, you sound like you have a lot of experience with that. You don't want to have to go to Rhino and create all these fancy things, and when you have to bring it back, it's like off. That defeats the purpose. So what we did is we relied on the grid that was created in Revit, and we took that grid as a reference line that's tied into Rhino and Revit. So if it changes, the geometry will change through Excel, because we reconstructed, every line is just a bunch of points, right? So we took those points and passed it through Excel, and when there's any modification, we would have that loop. Initially, I don't know if you guys have heard of Flux, but we used Flux, and then Flux thought the AAC industry was too slow for its technology, and they pretty much left. And so did Data too. But yeah, so that was how we did it. So yes, you're right. That is exactly how we had to divide up that module and treat each room as, okay, we know that one room must have a window. what kind of window it is, we don't know yet. We want to control what that is. So yeah. What would you say the next thing is?
Locate the windows within each module.
No. Close, but no. Anybody else? Okay, I can actually give you that because the next thing was placing the facade itself and then placing the windows. But you can interchange. It doesn't have to be exactly that way. So yeah, so placing the facades and placing the windows, that way we could actually see the alignment and test the code out pretty much. And so what else? What would you do now that you've developed this? What is the logical thing to do? So you have one line, you're trying to test your code, you find out that your code works on that one line. Test it on multiple, like, because you might then, add multiple to it, and then all of a sudden you figure out that your code breaks. That's not the best thing. So the next thing moving forward is, okay, now that everything seems to work well, the next thing I want to do is control my distribution. How do you think we would go about breaking up that task? That's purple. I hope you don't feel like you're on the spot. It's just to engage you guys. Like, we talk about these things every day, so we want to have like feedback. There's no wrong answer. I mean, there is, but it's. Which one? Place the windows? No, you won't. Right now, you're trying to control the distribution, so you're not placing windows. Do you have a purple? Okay, so ideally what you would do is take those curves and then you're going to apply that division. You're going to divide more curves.
Create driver curves in your grid line of levels?
Sorry?
Create driver curves in your grid line of levels?
Create driver curves?
Yes.
That's a blue, not a purple. But yeah, you're going to divide the module curves into two separate groups so that, yeah, sorry.
Can I ask a really dumb question?
There is no dumb questions.
What do you mean by driver curve?
So that is a very good question. So if you think about how we're building this script, right? We need something that can pretty much act as a module. How can I repeat this logic in multiple places? And the very first place we started was by using the line that's from the grid, because that's standard everywhere, right? So if we can use that line and create an algorithm that works for just one line, which defines two rooms, then we can apply that logic everywhere. But the thing that's driving it is the curve.
So what's the curve?
The curve itself is, let me see if I can go back. So if you look right here. Oh yeah, curve and a line. I don't know if that's what's throwing
Yeah,
you.
that's what
Okay, so it's pretty much the grid. That's all, and we're dividing it. So take this as one line, take that as another line, and so that's helping us place the windows. Quick. Yeah, so after you distribute this, or you create the different lines, what's the next thing to do? You apply one type to one line and apply the other type to the other line. And so like, as you go with this, you're not even writing code, you're just thinking through, how do I get from point A to point B? And so the whole point is not everyone's going to know how to write code, but people should know how to think through the process. And that's very important. And because we find out that a lot of people are keep distancing themselves from leveraging the power of this because they think it's, oh, I don't know how to write code. No, it's just thinking logically. And so the next thing is really applying it to the building. You scale up. So you tried one line, you tried many lines. All right, let's go full throttle. And when you apply it on the building, how do we get the different, like you asked, we get the different lines based on the grid and the levels. So we need to know where that's located in space, and that way we can then apply all the logic that we created to it. But then there's some rooms that don't need to have this type of window. If you notice, there's the communal spaces. They have different windows. The next thing really is to, by filtering it with room name. That's what we did. So we created, we took the points that define the room and also the room name from Revit into Rhino, and then we're able to search the name and then get the actual index of that point. And so when we know, oh, this is the point for the window that we don't, or for the room that we don't want to apply this to, we use that as a filter. So you can see that understanding what information you need from different places come into play. I hope you don't find this too technical. The whole point wasn't for it to be technical. Then, the next thing is, let me even see if I can show you an example. While this is loading, any questions so far? Yeah, no? Okay.
To maximize the lack of leftover panels, we use an algorithm or modules to utilize that with the window spacing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have like a trade-off with the interior program, like that, like an ideal interior wouldn't matter which panel, where it would be amongst the panels. Right?
No, we kept this. This was extremely an exterior exercise. Everything we did, we were walking off the surface, not exactly.
So it was like outside.
It was up exactly. And that's the kind of thing you also want to think about as you're modeling, because you don't want to be in a situation where you adjust the model and then all of a sudden there's, that is a problem. Yeah, you don't want that kind of thing. It looks like people have started coming in, but just to, drive home the point, it's computational thinking is about how data really moves, and that's what we want people to understand. It's not about the technicality of knowing how to script or knowing crazy code language, but knowing how data moves, and that's really what it's about. Thank you.